From cartel death squads hunting Hell's Angels across Mexico to the Los Chapitos delivering 5 bullets through Mathieu Bellanger's skull. These are the craziest wars between the Hell's Angels and the cartels. Number 1. Sammy Tamuro, gunned down by the cartel death squad. In December 2023, 2 men entered the upscale Marina Puerto Cancun shopping plaza on a motorcycle. They made their way through the plaza to the Total Sport gym, moving past every other patron, and went straight toward a man named Sammy Tamuro. Tamuro was caught by surprise when the 2 men approached him, and before he really had an opportunity to react, they shot him. The men then left in the middle of the panic they'd created, riding away on their motorcycle as if nothing had happened. Tamuro was rushed to the nearby IMSS hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. The shooting clearly wasn't random. But why Tamuro? He was a Canadian national who'd fled to Mexico sometime between 2020 and 2021 after Frederick Silva, a man connected to 4 murders in Canada, turned state informant. Tamuro had an extensive criminal history and was well known for being a member of the Quebec Hells Angels. His lengthy record included everything from extortion to manufacturing and selling drugs. In 2017, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison for profiting over $135,000 through selling drugs. Silva, who also had ties to the Quebec Hells Angels, apparently knew of at least 1 murder with Tamuro's involvement. That's when he decided to flee to Mexico. Investigators believe that the 2 assailants were hitmen working for the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. This wouldn't be the first time that the New Generation Cartel has been connected to international murders. A year earlier, in 2022, 2 Canadian nationals with drug and trafficking-related charges were also gunned down in broad daylight by members of the cartel. In Tamuro's case, investigators believe that some of his associates believed he would turn against them to save himself from a lengthy prison sentence. So a hit was placed on him before he could turn state informant. At number 2, when the cartel sends a message, Hell's Angels traffickers get erased. In January 2022, gunfire erupted in the middle of the upscale Hotel Escarré near Playa del Carmen. A man walked directly toward a small group of Canadians staying on the property. Without warning, he opened fire, shooting 3 of them before fleeing the area. 2 of the victims, Robert James Din and Thomas Cherokara, later died from their injuries. Surveillance footage showed the assailant bypassing tourists and heading straight for the group of Canadians. But it was Robert and Thomas they were clearly after. Both Din and Cherokara had extensive criminal histories in Canada involving drug trafficking, weapons offenses, and ties to cross-border criminal networks. They worked within a tier of Canadian organized crime where traffickers serve as brokers between Mexican suppliers and the biker-controlled narcotics markets back home. Investigators said the shooting was linked to unpaid debts within these international operations, a level of criminal activity where disputes are rarely resolved through negotiation. Their deaths were a result of cartel enforcement against Canadian traffickers operating on the Hells Angels-controlled side of the pipeline. The shooter had allegedly followed the victims for days, waited for the right moment, and had an escape route planned as well. For the Hells Angels, it was another reminder that their Canadian distributors are vulnerable the moment they step into cartel territory, and that once a cartel decides a debt is owed, even a luxury resort can become the stage for an execution. Number 3, how Wayne Schneider was buried alive in Thailand. Wayne Schneider, 37, was forced into a ute by 5 men outside his house in Pattaya, south of Bangkok, in the early hours of November 30th, 2015. He was taken to a rented home and tied to a metal commode wheelchair, where he was beaten and left alone for several hours. A day after he disappeared, Schneider's naked body was found in a deep roadside grave after police examined the GPS records of the white Toyota Hilux he was snatched in. Schneider, a well-known figure in Sydney's underworld scene, had fled Australia in February 2012 after police busted 2 of his meth labs. But before they could arrest him, Schneider had already made a run for it. He was also known for having ties with the Hells Angels, using the money from their fund to be able to sneakily relocate to Thailand when he needed to. Schneider then continued his crimes in Thailand, where he started creating a new network for himself. One of his closest associates was Antonio Bagnato, also an Australian man who had fled the country after reportedly stabbing his cousin to death. Law enforcement initially believed that local gangs and cartels were responsible for Schneider's murder because of the way he'd been abducted and killed. However, it soon came to light that Bagnato had hired Tyler Gerlad and 3 members of a local gang to abduct Schneider and extract a debt from him. He was only apprehended after Gerald confessed in exchange for a lighter sentence. But according to Bagnato, he wasn't to blame for Schneider's murder. He claimed that he had only asked the members of the gang to scare Schneider, not to kill him. Unsurprisingly, a judge found Bagnetto guilty on all counts and sentenced him to death. He is currently on death row at Bangkwang Prison, known as the Bangkok Hilton, and has appealed his sentence. Number 4. Michel Dune Guérin, the collateral of a turf war. In November 2023, Michel Guérin was murdered in broad daylight in the Loretteville borough of Quebec City. While the press referred to him as Michel Guérin, he was well known in the outlaw world as Dune, a hardened criminal, enforcer, and known associate of the Quebec Hells Angels. Although not a patched member, Dune was only ever seen around Hells Angels clubhouses. The attack was described by reporters as fast, precise, and clearly targeted. Initial reports indicated the shooter waited for Dune to arrive at a particular location, approached him directly, and fired multiple rounds before fleeing. No attempt was made to disguise the hit as anything but a deliberate execution. But why? According to the Quebec City Police, this was not a random act of violence and not the work of amateurs. This was a deliberate attack on Dune amid escalating tensions between the Hells Angels and members of local gangs who believed the motorcycle gang was disrupting their drug routes by way of Dune. With him out of the way, they could expand throughout the region, and they were right. Dune was the hard man the Hells Angels relied on to keep things steady and rolling. Nothing was stopping local thugs and gangs now that he was taken care of. At number 5, the billion-dollar betrayal that sparked a war. In the early 2000s, Jimmy Cournoyer, or the Pot Playboy, built one of the largest drug empires Canada had ever seen. Operating between Montreal, New York, and Mexico, he created a pipeline that moved Sinaloa cartel cocaine into Canada, where Hells Angels controlled distribution networks handled the street-level supply. Cournoyer wasn't a patch member, but he was a well-known associate of the outlaw gang and of the cartel. But in 2012, the cartel turned against him. U.S. prosecutors described Jimmy's drug trafficking system as a Mexico to Montreal superhighway, responsible for moving millions of dollars worth of cocaine every month. He was widely regarded as the liaison between the Hells Angels and the cartel. For over a decade, Jimmy relied on the cartel in South America for supplies and on the Hells Angels in Canada for protection. That came crashing down when the cartel decided they weren't being given their fair share of what was owed. Allegedly, a disgruntled ex-girlfriend was responsible for bringing the Pot Playboy's world crashing down. However, many believe that Jimmy already knew his time was up. From the cartel's end, they were the ones making the product that would eventually get shipped out through their channels into Canada. Not only did they believe they were owed a much larger cut than the Hells Angels, but they saw how Jimmy's Canadian associates were the ones profiting from his lavish lifestyle, parties, and everything that came with it. While it's not known exactly how many people turned against Jimmy, except of course, a disgruntled ex, it's safe to say that he irked a lot of people over his decade-long criminal career. Today, the Pot Playboy is serving out a 27-year sentence, officially ending his billion-dollar enterprise. Number 6, Los Chapitos put a bullet in the Hells Angels pipeline. In December 2024, Mathieu Belanger, a 39-year-old Quebecer, reported in multiple Canadian and Mexican outlets as wanted in Canada and linked to Hells Angels-affiliated trafficking networks, was found with 5 gunshot wounds to the head in a Playa del Carmen parking lot. Belanger had fled Canada after finding out that the Crown was building a case against him for manufacturing and selling methamphetamines. He relocated with his partner, also a drug dealer and associate of the Hells Angels, and their children from Quebec to Playa del Carmen. Belanger went by the alias Barbu, and his partner, Andre N. Vignola, was often referred to as S. Together, the two fled Canada in 2022 and continued their crimes in Mexico. However, they escalated. The couple went from manufacturing and distributing methamphetamine to cocaine. Mexico's SSC had reportedly been building a case against him after they seized his vehicle filled with illegal firearms, several rounds of ammunition, and drugs. However, since both Barbu and S were living in the country with falsified documents, they were released on technicalities. In effect, Barbu was untouchable in Mexico, and that irked the Los Chapitos. After realizing that Barbu was becoming more and more popular, with nothing stopping him from expanding, the Los Chapitos decided it was time to do something about it. In December 2024, 2 armed men followed Barbu home from the gym and gunned him down in the parking lot outside of his home. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.